Welcome to the channel, Drew. Today we're not doing a Drew review. We're going to be instead looking at the top 4.5 things no one tells you you need for fly fishing. This list is from my experience as a fly fisherman for trout, but I think some of these things apply to other types of fly fishing too. So you all know the basics: rod, reel, leader, tippet, hemos, but these items aren't as well known, so maybe you'll learn something new today. All right, we're gonna start the list off with number 4.5, and that's a wading staff. Now this one only gets a half point because only half of the people need it, but the people who do need it really need it. So wading staffs, if you don't know, are big sticks you use for wading. Pretty self-explanatory. They make specialized ones that are telescopic and probably cost a lot more. You could also just use a big stick. I think in the community, wading staffs kind of get made fun of a lot, but if you really need one, they're an awesome thing to have, and they can take someone who isn't able to fish a tough river to wade and make it a lot more accessible to them. So that's why they get half a mention on this list. Number 4 on our list is the Ketchum release. The Ketchum release is this little weird plastic device that is supposed to help you release your fly from a fish's mouth without harming the fish. It's a really simple concept, but it is pretty effective. It's a stick with a tube with a slot at an angle at the end. You slip the line through the little slot, and then you slide it down to the fly in the fish's mouth, and then you just push back in the direction that the hook is stuck in the fish's mouth, and theoretically it should come unstuck. Now, I tried to get some footage of me doing this, but literally every fish I caught, the hooks came out in the net, so it was really difficult to get footage of it. So here's some honorary footage. I think this little tool is pretty handy. It's really good for really cold weather fishing, and then you don't have to get your hands wet. Or if the fish are really stressed and the water's really warm, then this just gets them back in the water and swimming around without you having to touch them and getting super stressed out. They also claim that it will save your flies, and hackle on them. They also claim if you break it and ship it back to them, they'll replace the whole thing. It costs $25, which seems a little much for what's essentially a stick, but I think the value's there, and if you care about protecting the fish in your fishery, might be worth getting. Also, the name Ketchum Release is like catch and release, but it's also invented and made in Ketchum, Idaho, so that's kind of fun. All right, number 3 is a water thermometer. The thermometer isn't so much for your enjoyment as it is for the health and safety of the fish, kind of like the catch and release. If you don't know, trout are a cold water species, and they should not be fished for when the water temperature is above 68 Fahrenheit, or for all you Euros and Africans and Asians and literally everyone else in the world, 20 degrees Celsius. So this just enables you to know what water temperature you're fishing and when you should stop. And I personally like just having the data and just knowing what the water temperature is. These are basically just normal thermometers, but they're usually encased in a plastic or usually metal sleeve, and that just keeps it from breaking when it's out on the river and spilling mercury in the river. And it also keeps the water in, so when you pull it out of the water, it doesn't immediately rise back up on a hot day. It's also worth noting the proper way to take the water temperature is to go out into where the water is flowing in the current and hold it under the water, and then lift it out and take a reading as quickly as possible. Sometimes you see people take a reading right on shore where it's shallow and baking in the sun, and the water can be significantly warmer there. Number 2 is the Opros rod holder. This little thing is pretty handy because it gives you an extra hand when you're out on the river. I bought this one on a whim because I used to fish for bass out of a little kayak in New Hampshire, and I thought this would be a better way to hold my rod because the built-in rod holders were for spin rods, and I nearly lost my really nice fly rod. But then COVID changed everything, and I actually, after I ordered this, I never used it for its intended purpose because I moved back to Colorado. It has a lot of uses outside of fishing for bass in my kayak, and I found when I attached it to my belt or my pack when fishing for trout, it was pretty handy. So it has this little belt attachment, and it's pretty wide, which makes it able to attach to belts really of all sizes, including those big thick wading belts, which is nice. I found that it's a little loose on smaller belts, but they do have like a secondary attachment system, which is much more secure. but considerably harder to actually attach. So when it's attached to your belt, it's fairly secure, and then the whole thing actually swivels a little bit. It's on a little clicky, springy gear, so you can change the angle so the rod isn't in your way, which is really nice to have. And basically, to use it, you just put the cork of the rod right in the little slot right there with these little hooks, and it holds it pretty damn securely. But for extra security, there's a little elastic, and you pull it over the hooks, and that'll keep your rod from going anywhere. I've got the most use out of this thing when I have like a tangle or I'm re-rigging. Then I can put the rod in my little rod holder, and I don't have to pinch it under my armpit or under my chin, and I have both hands totally free to untangle or re-rig the rod. So that's super nice. But I think it also has uses elsewhere, like the kayak fishing I was doing. Also, I've heard of people using products like this or similar ones when wading the flats, like in the Bahamas or Florida for bonefish. Then you can carry one rod for bonefish and then maybe another heavier setup if you happen to see some tarpon or like just some other fish you want to target. Oh, and I forgot, I also use my rod holder when I'm biking with my rod, which I know most people don't do, but I actually do it a lot. These retail for like, I think it's like 30 bucks right now. Honestly, pretty good deal for a pretty tough and useful piece of equipment. I would highly recommend getting one. Before we get to number one, there are two honorable mentions. The first one is the Pyopod. And I'm not just saying this because I have a video on it and I want you to watch it, but I'm mostly saying it because of that. And the second honorable mention is only for people with a fish pond Nomad net. So these nets are really popular and really nice, and they make a great wading staff. Remember, number 4.5. And the problem is they get beat up when you do that because they're a composite like carbon fiber and it wears through them. But Fish Pond makes a little rubber like butt end cap for it, and you just slip it on and it's really tight and secure, stays there, gives it a little more grip, and it keeps it from getting worn down. Absolute must have if you have a Fish Pond Nomad net. And finally, the number one item on our list is a net magnet leash system. Now, I don't know if there's a proper name for these. A lot of different companies make them, but these are for a smaller net, like a net you just carry personally for wading around and that hangs off your back. Now, these are super common now. A few years ago, they were less known, but everyone who has a small personal net should have this. It's so useful when fishing alone. It just keeps the net dangling off your back like it would if you didn't have it, but then you can pull it out, net a fish, and then put it right back where it is, and it's totally secure. Plus the added leash means it's not going to go away. I used to just kind of hold my net or like put it in the back pocket of my vest when I used a vest, and I definitely had to go chasing it down the river several times because I didn't put it in all the way or it wasn't secure. I dropped it when I had it under my armpit. But with this, that's not an issue you have to worry about. It's super simple. There's two strong magnets. One of them you connect to your vest, the other you connect to the net, and they clip together, which holds the net in place, and they're quite strong. And then for backup, there is also a leash that will keep your net from floating away if it does come unattached inadvertently. And if you're like me and like to get adventurous when you're fishing, and you're bushwhacking through some pretty thick brush, then your net will probably get caught in that brush and come off if you have the magnet. But at least the model I have has these little clips which allow you to connect it permanently. So then it doesn't matter if it comes off with the magnet because it's connected physically. And truthfully, I often forget to do that, and then I walk and then all of a sudden I feel it tug back on me, and it's because my net's caught in a bush like 6 feet behind me. Honestly, this thing has been by far my most used of any of the items on this list. Every time I go fishing alone and I'm not doing a guided trip, I have this on me. It's just, I can't understate how much better this is than any other system. Like 10 out of 10. And like I said, lots of different companies make these little magnetic net attachments. You can find them on Amazon or better yet, your local fly shop to support local businesses. They're really great. Everything on this list is pretty great, and I would consider looking at all the items, seeing what you need, seeing what's right for you. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It's a little different than what we've been doing recently, but I think it was a good idea, and Let me know if you want more stuff like this. Also, like, subscribe if you want. Anyway, thanks for watching the channel, Drew, and we'll see you in the next one.